You can't hang on to yourself. You don't have to try not to hang on to yourself. It can't be done. And that is salvation.
In this second episode of LilyList, we continue the conversation with my mother, Judy. We delve into the loss of her son and my brother Michael, how she navigated that, and how she has come out the other side. As with the first episode, she continues to find ways to move forward and find the joy in every single day. I was figuring on, we sort of got all the way up to, Michael years, for lack of a better term. It's funny, I was sitting on the sofa this morning with the dogs and I was thinking, I remember Sydney Street, and I don't remember it, the first day Michael came home, but I do remember there was like Sydney Street, you walked in the front door, there was like that hallway, and there was that big room. And I remember when Michael was there, he was in the crib. Chris and I were like sleeping on the floor, and Marcy and Stacey were in his bunk beds. And then Steven, I think, was living with us, and he was in that back room.
No, that was George.
Oh, I thought it was Steven.
No, that was George. Yeah, well, George was George. Or maybe George was just over for the weekend. I don't think Steven was with us at that point.
Okay.
I could be wrong, though.
Remember, I think Steven was there for some period of time, and then he was gone because eventually me and Chris moved into that back room.
Yeah, I don't remember. It was just I'm telling you, I have compartmentalized my life really all the way back from probably, 10 years, maybe 10 years ago. I kind of know what I did 10 years ago, but I'm very good at compartmentalizing, and a lot of it I just forgot. I think I was just so mentally incapable of just taking in all of this stuff that I don't know what it was, but I don't remember that. I don't remember like details. I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, I can see that apartment. And I don't know. Memory's a weird thing. I don't know if I'm seeing reality or not, but I do recall it's like a straight shot from the front door to the hallway to the room we stayed in. Then there was that little area where the bathroom was off to the left, and then there was the back room. And the kitchen came out, if you walked out of the bathroom straight, you'd go into the kitchen. Then from the kitchen, there was the room that you and Jim stayed in, then there was the living room. So
yeah. And then there was a little pantry off the kitchen.
Yeah, the pantry off the kitchen, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like the layout that I remember. But what I was thinking more of was, so I'm guessing what Michael was it 85 when he was
Michael
born?
was 84.
84.
Yeah.
So I would have been 11 going on 12 because he was in May. But you were what, 33 or 34 at that point?
33.
Okay.
33 I was.
Yeah. So, I mean, what was it like to be bringing a baby into Sydney Street?
I was very happy about it because I think I wanted, I always, it's funny, as nuts as I was, I always kind of I always like kids. I mean, I never considered them like big burdens or anything. I considered them some when I was drinking, I considered kind of, these were people that, I had to take care of or whatever. So I always, when I got pregnant with Michael, he wasn't happy, but I was thrilled. And, it wasn't so much bringing him into it. I never thought about it, but I was sober too at that point.
Yeah.
So to me, it was like a new chance to maybe be a little bit better as a mother or whatever. That, you know what I'm saying? It was like an opportunity for me. I never considered it a bad thing. I mean, because I was nuts, because I had no concept of really what 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 everything entailed, and we had 8 kids between us, and like I said, I think I just compartmentalized. When I had Michael, I said, this is a great opportunity for me to grow and I was thrilled. So, when he came in, actually, I always say this, when Michael was born, he got the best of everybody. Because he had older siblings, which, like I said, I considered that a positive, because everybody liked Michael, I think. I know, Marcy thought he had cute little feet and stuff, Stacy, as far as kids go. So I didn't think anybody hated him or anything. So I figured that was good for Michael, because he had siblings, and they were older, and they could kind of keep an eye on him throughout. And I just considered it, and I was sober. I was 33. I think I'd been sober since I was 29 or so. But I considered it an opportunity for me to maybe get it half right, be a better person as a mother or whatever. So I was thrilled. I mean, I used to get up and, Jimmy and I were both kind of getting sober and finding our way and trying to maneuver his divorce with kids, and I had 4 kids, and we weren't there was a lot of financial stuff going on, and it was just crazy. But when Michael was born, I said, he was like mine. It wasn't even a fact that it was mine and Jimmy's, because Jimmy had said, if you have this baby, you're gonna have to take care of it. And I said, fine. I said, I'll take care of it. So he was very good for me, Michael, because I did learn how to do things a little bit more normal and whatever. And like I said, he had all kinds of good influences around him, as far as you kids. And so I was quite thrilled with Michael. I was quite thrilled with anything, because I was sober. I was really high. I was really high on being sober for the first 5 years or so. I didn't realize that I wasn't, I figured this is great. I didn't look at everybody and everything and say, well, this probably isn't the best thing. I just said, well, now I can kind of try to get my act together. And I think that's a lot of it was, a lot of that happened because Michael went to Catholic school, and he was littler than everybody. So I had to take care of him. He was like an only child almost. And, I wanted to give him the best I could, the best education. He went to Catholic school. I wanted him to be involved. He was in the Boy Scouts and stuff. So, I was thrilled with that. Nothing crossed my mind except this is great.
And I
But
remember my memories of the early years with Michael are patchy, but what I do remember is, and maybe this is like I was gonna say maybe it's the sort of Dutcher genetic influence, but Chris was a little this way too. I don't think of myself, Marcy, or Stacy this way, but what I remember of like Sydney Street, and then Savin Hill Ave, he was fearless. So I remember him being like when he wanted to get out of his playpen, he just started like dumping himself out of it. He would just
he
like get
would
up to the
flip.
top and just flip out and whack his head or whack it, whatever.
Yeah.
I remember
And
we
he
had
would
some
just
sort
fall
of
on the
like,
floor.
yeah, and we used to have some like cabinet thing in the kitchen. And he would pull the drawer out and stand on it. And one time it came down on him and he'd whack
Yeah.
his head off with those old iron radiators, and he'd like whack his head off it and be going up to the clinic when he was a kid. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I remember of him in those early days from Sydney and then Savin Hill. So, and that seemed to be kind of a trait he just had innately
Yeah.
from when he was.
Yeah. He really was. He would flip himself. I would wake up in the middle of the night when I finally put his crib in the room with Marcy and Stacy. I'd put his crib in there, and I would wake up in the middle of the night. He'd be wandering around the house, and then one day I watched him. He got up from his nap. He used to backflip over. He never put his leg over to get out. He used to kind of just backflip,
Yeah.
and he would smash onto the floor. But he really was. He was the type of kid that he always wanted to do stuff. He didn't care. And it's funny because I always had like a tight rope, like a tight rope on him, because I was always kind of, I always feared something would happen to him. And it's funny. I sit and think about it, and I said, I wonder if as a mother, you have this innate thing, like I almost knew he wasn't going to be an adult. So when he was a kid, like he would go next door. There were two little boys next door when we were on Oakton Avenue, and we were on the second floor, and there was a little porch out back, and he would go over and play with the two little boys. He was probably, I would say, maybe 7 or 8. And I would watch him leave the house and go over there, and I would watch him in the backyard to make sure nobody stole him. So I had a very weird sense that I had to keep an eye on this kid. It wasn't gonna. It really was. I don't know how to explain it, but I was always very. I was always very cautious with wherever he went. And then, of course, when he was 17, 16 and 17, I remember his, senior trip. He didn't graduate high school because he hated school. And I would say to him, he would be in his room, and he hated school, and he felt bad though. He said, well, I was like the last one in my class, and I'd say, he wouldn't do his work. He just wouldn't. But then he would feel bad, and I'd say to him, look at Kurt. Kurt's successful, and he found his niche, and I said, I'm sure you will too. School isn't everything, Michael. But even though he didn't graduate from high school because he had to go to summer school to get his diploma, he went to the graduation. He didn't care. He's like, yeah, I'm going to go over to, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay. But he was kind of a kid that, I was always I was a helicopter mom before they termed it. If he wanted to go off with the Boy Scouts somewhere, I had to make sure that somebody I trusted was going with him, and I'd have to call her. And so I think I always had an innate sense that, I had to be careful with this kid. And then when he was 16 and 17, and the high school trip came up to Jamaica, the father said, you can't go. His grades were terrible. He wasn't graduating. And it was, you can't go, your grades suck. You don't deserve to go. And somehow he finagled me. He could always finagle me to just, get it approved by the father that he could go on Jamaica. And I'm always glad that I did that, because, it's, he had a hell of a time. And when he came home, I said to him, did you think about staying? And he said, yeah, I really did. He said, it's beautiful over there. So I was happy about that. But he was fearless, but I would let him go so far, and then I'd pull him back. But I don't think he ever resented that per se. He didn't, he kind of, and him and I kind of had this, it was kind of like him and me against Jim, and we just knew that. So I would try to give him some room to, go over to Marcy's or whatever. But he was a good kid. He was fearless, and he was a good kid.
When Serena and I were first dating, and like you said, he was younger. So at the time, Marcy and me in particular were both working. And I remember we took him to see, I don't remember, we'd take him to see movies. One of them was, this had to be Victory Road days. He was still pretty young. And we took him to see one of the Home Alone movies, and if it wasn't my brother, you'd be mortified because he was laughing so loud the entire thing, even in parts that were very funny.
Yeah.
And I remember Marcy, buying him shoes and fancy shoes and all. And so he sort of had this. He had this kind of lifestyle, I guess, that we didn't have growing up, which none of us. I don't ever recall any of us, as far as the four of your other kids, feeling like jealous or anything of that nature. I don't think that ever entered anybody's minds. It was just kind of like maybe we were just used to so many people being around, but it was just kind of like there's this new person around, and I don't know. He seemed to bring a certain levity to situations that wasn't there before he showed up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's funny because you kids never, ever, ever always welcome Michael, and you were always good to him. And, Marcy started buying him Nikes, and I'd say to her, you can buy him whatever you want, but I'm not going to spend, $60 on a pair of sneakers for a 9-year-old. And and she was funny. She continued to buy him. She kept him in Nikes. And he did have this, and you were always good to him, Chris and Stacy. So he had this kind of lifestyle where he enjoyed himself. And he was funny. His favorite movie was Beetlejuice. And he would sit in front of the TV. I would put in the cassette, and he would literally say everyone's part as they were talking. He knew that movie every word. So yeah, and he was a nice kid. When he died, one of his friends at Latin, as a matter of fact, she's the one. Well, anyway, I got a letter from this girl at Latin saying how humane Michael was at such an early age. She was getting picked on, and he walked up and said, screw. And she said, I'll always remember that. He stood up for me. She said, where nobody else did. And that's how Michael was. He had an innate kind of goodness to him, I think. But I'm his mother. I could be biased. But he used to, when he worked at Dunkin' Donuts, and I didn't find this out until he died, he used to, take his tips and buy a pizza for the homeless under the bridge. The bridge going to Quincy there in Neponset. I guess they used to hang out, and somebody told me that, yeah, he used to take pizza up to the guys, but he would never say anything. I never knew about it, but he had a very good heart. And it was funny, this girl that wrote the letter about, probably about 10 years ago, Marcy called up and said, there's this woman that lives in Winthrop I was talking to. She went to school with Michael. I said, you're kidding. She said, no. She said she was a friend of his. And the girl started babysitting for her. As a matter of fact, her name was Lee. And she was the girl that wrote me the letter. So that was kind of Marcy doesn't get blown away by too much. But I remember Marcy calling me and said, guess who I met? She said, Lee, I forget the name. I didn't know who she was. She says, yeah, she was a classmate of Michael. She said she sent a letter. I went, oh my God. So it was kind of like, Marcy was saying, isn't that odd that she would be in Winthrop, but I would run into her. So I know the girls were babysitting. She had 2 little kids at one point. But anyway, it was just such a weird thing. So it was always like there was stuff, more stuff that, he would do. But he was a good kid. He would come home when he worked at Dunkin' Donuts. He'd come home and he'd always have a coffee for me. And, we could talk. I could sit and talk to him. And, he'd say something about the father. And I'd say, he's just a miserable man, Michael. Just don't let it get to you. And, so I think we had a pretty good relationship. I always say to people, they'll go, oh, I got 2 kids, and Jesus, it's a handful. And I said, if I knew what I know today about life and kids and everything else, I'd still have kids, and I would still have kids early. I'd have kids in my 20s, no doubt about it, because I think they're one of the, I think, I think it's just something that I don't even know how to explain it. You have these kids and whether you do a good job or not, they grow up and you hope for the best and then, and then hopefully, they'll have kids and it's just like a continuation. I think that's probably the most profound thing you could do in your life. I really do. I think it's profound that you would do that. And so I don't know, but Michael he was a real he was a real asset to life in general, I think. And everybody loved Michael. He had friends. Of course, when he died, he had friends that were 20, 30, and 40 and I think he kind of saved me in a lot of ways too when I had him. And I realized that. That's what I said. I was kind of thrilled to have him anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I was going to say, I mean, the way you talk about it, but it makes me think the way you talked about us with George, where I mean, it sounds to me like the having kids was kind of what anchored you and helped you move forwards.
that
'Cause
that was
for all these,
that was exactly what anchored me. I wouldn't be sober if it wasn't for your kids. I know that. I probably would have been on drugs because George had offered me many times, "Do you want to try this?" He used to inject himself, and I'd say to him, "What are you crazy? Who would put a needle in their arm?" But I always recognized the inherent danger of like heroin. And I knew it was very tough to get off of. But, to me in my head, booze was booze. It was, you could buy it at the store and this and that. But I don't think I probably would have tried it if it was. I used to say to him, we have kids. What are the two of us are going to be nodding off, even though I was drinking and stuff. So that's a good word for it. It really anchors me. And the grandkids now anchor me. They really do. It's not that I think they're mine or I'm trying to, recapture, your childhoods or whatever, but they have an energy to them and there's just something about kids. And like I said, of course, when Marcy had Jenny right after, well, it's a couple of years after Michael died. uh, I mean, I needed that because I was just walking around. It was just like, whatever. What do you want? You want me over there? Okay. You want me over there? Okay. But when like Jenny came, it was just new life, and that was an anchor for me because I found something that I could put my energy into and feel good about. Watch them. I used to sit. Jenny would I'd go over Fridays and Marcy and Terry worked, but I'd go over Fridays like at 7 in the morning, and half the day she'd be on the couch beside me, whether she was sleeping or awake or whatever, because I used to just like to watch her. So that's a very apt description, Kurt. I think the kids did anchor me.
and that was what my thinking was. So, I mean, it sounded like even with George, you kind of were able to understand this is another adult and, you can't control it and he has to make his decisions. But with the kids, there was some necessity there. And I mean, so of course, I know that Michael was about to leave for the Navy
Yes,
just after he died. And I mean, what I was thinking about was, of course, all your other kids are grown and out of the house, and it's you and Jim in a condo, and that future goes away when Michael dies, and that anchor is gone. So, I mean, getting
that's why.
back to kind of another challenge that presents itself, and I mean, that's not to
That
relive the shock of that, but then navigating through that had to be immensely difficult.
It was terrible. But then again, I said this is, I couldn't hold him. Like this is what he wanted to do. And he signed up and this and that. And you know, probably the day he signed up, I started in my head. I started preparing for the fact that he would not be around in August. And so I was gradually, mentally and spiritually, I think, letting go of him. But I didn't think much about, when he signed up, it was just kind of like, well, thank God I got my job. So it was just kind of, I just kind of say, well, what can I be grateful here? And it was my job. And, I said, we'll see what happens. And that's why, again, I think it was so important when Marcy had the baby, because it was, I really was lost. And I think I would have done something. I think if he would have got in the Navy and stuff, I would have poured more. I would have, poured. I, I definitely wouldn't have retired when I did. I retired. When did I retire? I retired after he died, but whatever. I think I would have stayed, but I don't know. But that's true. It was just it was another adjustment for me. Like I always considered like stuff that I did in my life and stuff. Just you adjust, and so like I said, when Michael died, I think I just was walking around in the fog anyway. But it was. I used to think I had to let him go emotionally. And from the day he signed up, I started doing that. And I never really thought much, really. I never really thought much about what would happen. I just wanted to, just kind of let him go. And he was still here. And then when he died, it all just went into a black hole anyway.
Yeah, it's for me, of course, it's crazy because I woke up that morning and my only thought was, oh, it's mine and Serena's anniversary. I gotta get her a
Your
card or something.
anniversary, yeah.
And then I got that message and went over, and it's that day would have been important to some extent, right? Just because of that's when we got married, but having it now be this sort of, I don't know how to put it. You could say it's kind of like a day of life and death, but at the same point, I think of a marriage in the best sense. A marriage is kind of about hope. And one thing that I would say about Michael, even though it's the day he died, I mean, Michael really seemed to be able to bring hope to I don't want this to sound wrong to you, but when we were at Sydney Street and I was getting older, it just seemed not hopeless, but it definitely there was some darker
Plus,
times.
that
I
was,
mean, there was some
yes, it
darker
was,
times, and Michael really brought a lot of hope. I mean, there was this new person that was there that you knew was going to grow up and go through these things, and particularly even, I mean, I got my first job when I was 13 or 14 at that little corner store. And
yeah,
I remember, I remember when he was a baby, getting it wasn't even a check. They just paid you in cash in envelopes and
yeah,
buying things and bringing them home for him. And, there was just something to focus on where you felt like I can support this and move it forward. So that day to me now is not a good and bad day. It's kind of a really, it's a single day where life kind of sums itself up, and it's a day to reflect for me these days more than anything else.
yeah, it is. But it's unfair too, because I often think of that. That's, that June, June 3rd is just a horrible day for me. But as it gets older, I say to myself, remember that it's Serena and Kurt's anniversary, at least text them or whatever, because it's a, it's a rotten day, but then again, it's 20 years gone, and, 20, you can't, that's not something that I really like holding on to. I have to force myself to say, the day is not, it's the day itself is not the pain. It's what happened on that day. But, I, I've had tragic things happen to me on other days too. So yeah, it's just yeah, I try more and more to get away from that. Michael's birthday, I started what I would do on Michael's birthday was I used to bring pastries or cupcakes or something into work. And I'd say, it's Michael's birthday today. And that's how I really want to think of June 3rd, not as this tragic day, but it's Kurt and Serena's, wedding anniversary. And, because, yeah, you do. When a kid dies, you think about him every day anyway. And then you just, I got to a point where I just had to say, that's enough. Look at what you have in your life. So, I just try to get away from it because, and you think of them every day. So, yeah, it's definitely a kind of a, unique experience, but, I'm not, then again, what I find is when Michael died, people come out of the woodwork that have lost children and you never think about that. And that was always very reassuring to me too. Like I'm just one of many, and I don't have to make myself. I'm not that important. I'm going to make myself, the victim of, life's injustice on June 3rd. So I really try to get away from that. But the first couple of years, that's all I could think of. But then, you and Serena, that's hopeful. That's, a legacy. You and her getting married, and it was that's a good day. So you don't take anything away from that either.
I was going to say, though, that's a good point to bring up what you just said, is that realizing you're not alone. And as you said, having Jenny being born was a big sort of shot in the arm of that hope coming back,
It's a
and that
hope.
being
That's
able
what
to
it
anchor.
is.
But I wondered, and we talked last about George and Good Samaritans and things. I mean, for those couple of years, I know just from our experience, like the year after it happened, I remember going up to, where do we go, Lake Champlain,
Yeah.
sometime after Michael died. And but I know that that first year I mean, you really carried it with you. You could, not only mentally but physically see it on you.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, was there, what was it that you found that, even though it wasn't, quote unquote, making you happy or bringing hope, but what is it that kind of got you through that first year or two,
I think it
before the
was just
grandkids?
I just think it was the support. I knew I had the support of you kids. But a lot of it too was meeting people. I would, people, when they find out you've lost a kid, they go, "Oh, I lost a kid back here," and I think that helped a lot. Um, with the Samaritans, that helped because that was worse than what I was going through. I was looking for things worse than what I was going through. I would listen to mothers talk about how, their husbands died and the kid could never accept it. And she found the, 19-year-old kid dead in his room. And I thought, how do people go through that? And then I started, reading stories. There was a book that was out about a woman and a couple that lost their two daughters. The aunt came to pick them up, and they didn't know the aunt was in crisis. She was having some kind of crisis, and she took these kids out of a car in an expressway and, walked across the expressway, and all three of them were killed. So a lot of it was the AA. I would say you just got to, AA is today. What are you doing today? And a lot of it was trying to find, it sounds terrible, but that's what I did, trying to find people that I considered was worse off than me. And they were seeing it through. I would look for books about tragedies that I thought were worse than mine and read them and wonder how. And I think that just got me to a point where I was saying to myself, this is terrible, but how do people survive this, or how do people survive that? So the Samaritans were a great place. Was a great place for me because there was a lot of support there, and a lot of parents who lost their children through suicide, which I think is worse than losing a child through an automobile accident. I don't know if you can understand that, but I say to myself, that would be something like, why couldn't I reach this kid? Why didn't I see it? Why didn't I do this? Why didn't I do that? So to me, that was worse. I don't know if it's worse or not, but that was it. I was going through the motion, but I was also surrounding myself again with, what I learned in AA, what I learned to not drink, to do that. And the Samaritans were lots of people lost their children. And so it was just kind of immersing myself in this stuff. But my biggest thing was, and like I said, you had created that thing online.
Yep.
Remember with Michael and people were posting stuff that you don't even know how much that helped me because I could go on any time of the day or night and I could say these are the people that were important to Michael, and they were just such positive things and everything. There was just a whole bunch of things. Like a year after Michael died, I was still getting 5 or 6 cards or notes in the mail. And I remember coming home from work one day and Jimmy saying, one day you're going to come in and there's not going to be any cards. And I said, well, and that was a great help to me because I would come home and read them. And so it was just a bunch of everything. But I remember the site that you did, that I was on all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. I was doing things with the Samaritans right after Michael died because I remember when I first initially went to represent work, I had mentioned it was only 6 weeks after he died. So I had to do that. I just had to keep just going. And I knew in my head that if I just kept going, and people would say, some people would say it gets easier, and then some people would say, it never really gets easy, but you learn to adjust. And I found that more true than it gets easier because I think you do. It's a new it's almost like a new relationship with the deceased. You're still thinking of them every day. You still might talk to them, in your head or whatever, but it's different. It's not, it's just a different type of thing. So I found that, it'll get easier, but it'll always be there. It's never going to go away. I found that to be very realistic. I didn't want to hear that because every time people would say that, I'd say, well, how do you even how can you be okay with this? But, it does. It does. It's just so like I said, I think it was just the collective things that were put in place when he died. And I knew that this was the only way that I was going to survive. So,
Well, I think that was, so then, we talked about it with George, and with Michael, it's the same. I'm sure that this is, I shouldn't say sure, but I would guess that this is different for each person. What Michael's legacy was, when I think about him, I think about again the sort of the light that was brought into sort of a environment that could be somewhat dark at times when we were growing up. And then I think about just all the with Michael. I remember you mentioned Beetlejuice. He and I basically memorized Spaceballs and Beetlejuice, and we would just watch them
yeah.
over and over again. And so I remember like stupid things to me. It was again that the he was always fun. He was always funny. So to me, the things like wandering around Oakton Ave with one of Jim's t-shirts on that was around his ankles and looked like a
Yeah.
dress. And from there, when he got older, the things where the story he used to tell where he'd like climb out his window at the middle of the night and jump in a car,
Yes.
um, and all those sorts of things. That's kind of how I remember. And then, of course, you mentioned this at the funeral. I mean, there was hundreds of people that showed up, and I had no idea the impact he'd had on so many people, and I still
Yeah.
remember that. So to me, I'm kind of curious how you see, what his life was and the impact and how it continues on at this point.
I think with Michael, and to me, he was just positive energy. He was just somebody that he had just physically, physically, he was a, good looking kid, but he always had this gentleness and he always had this lightness to him. And he always had the energy and he would always try to make you feel good. I would be in an argument with Jim or something, and he'd come in later and he'd say, "Don't let him bother you. Don't cry." But he just had a real compassion to him and a goodness to him. But he was humble too for his age, and he liked to experiment with everything. I remember one time he went out and came in. I could tell he was high. I know, I'd say to him, you shouldn't be, maybe you should be cutting down on whatever you're doing. They don't go out, just you've got work tomorrow, if you're going to have a beer, but that's it. But, I remember he came in one night and he looked pretty rugged, but he had work the next day and he went right to bed. And about 5 minutes later, these three girls, he always had girls around him. These three girls rang the bell. It must have been about 1 o'clock. Jim was at work and I went down and the girl said, "We just wanted to let you know, we were at a party and Michael took, some kind of pill or something." And she said, "We're worried about him and we just want you to be aware." So I went, "Oh, God, thanks. Okay." And I went upstairs and I woke him up and I made him coffee and, then he finally said, "I'm going, I got to go to bed. I got work tomorrow." And I said, "Well, I just want to make sure you're going to wake up tomorrow." And he put his arms around me and he said, "Don't worry about me." And he was just like that even as a kid. I mean, he never, yeah, his legacy was one of, I would say one of, uh, just pure energy, just good energy, good vibes. He was, and like I know you kids have good feel. Yeah, I've never met anybody that really said he was an asshole. And he was a 19-year-old kid that was partying. But everybody always said he'd give friends' mothers rides, and I think we're all here. This is my own personal belief. I think we're all here for probably one reason, and we don't know what that is, of course. And I think for whatever purpose Michael was here for, I think he served that. The the universe said, you did good. That was it. Because there's no rhyme or reason why why people are in accidents or why people do this or why people do that. When Michael first died, I said, I would say to myself, well, maybe I shouldn't have been so uh, kind of so. It was okay. I knew he was out partying, but you always chalk it up to teenagers, and he wasn't coming and stumbling drunk and stuff. At first I said, well, maybe I should have been more hard with him on that. And then I said, no, there was, it just was. I don't know why he left, but that was my thinking. The universe had said that's good. And he was always, I remember at Stacy's wedding, he cut the garter for you throw the guy throws the garter and Michael cut. He had so many experiences packed into his 19 years. He just had all kinds of stuff happen. So I said, you know, and that's another thing. When he did die, I says he wouldn't want me to, he wouldn't want me to sit and be all bummed out for the rest of my life. He would have wanted me to be happy. He would have, that, and I just knew that. So that was a big part. But I think he just brought so much positivity into this world, and and I think he still does. I think I say just telling like I'll tell the girls about little stories, or I'll say, Michael would have loved you. So they know Michael. So as a matter of fact, Sarah she got a necklace with uh, 3 4s on it from, she said that's for Uncle Mike. She never met him, but she knows about him, and they're going to get her and Jenny are going to get tattoos, and they don't know what to get. They want to get sister tattoos, and then Sarah said, we're trying to maybe get a 4 in there somehow. Jenny's soccer jersey was 4.
Mm.
She said, I wanted the number 4. So, it continues, it goes on. They know him, and they never met him. So, it's amazing.
Me being the opposite of Michael with regard to um, being nice to people around me. I have something, we've got a number of friends in their 60s and 70s that we're close with here. And I always ask them, you've only got a few good summers left. So what are you going to do with them? And so, we talked about George and Michael and the things you've gone through. But if you look back on your life, what's kind of what have you taken away from what you've gone through? What's been important? What have you learned? And what are you focused on for whatever time you've got left here?
I don't, I look back at my life, and it's what got me to my life right now. That's all. It's a journey. I believe that. It sounds corny, but it's a journey. I don't know why I don't know what or how, or maybe I was supposed to do something. I don't know. I just know that, the way I've come along I think is the way I probably had to come along. I had to experience these things to get the insight I have in myself. Maybe not, people go, well, you didn't have to, but I think I did. I think I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be right now. And I really believe that. It's just a feeling I have. I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I don't know why I had to go through the life I went through, or why I did the things I did on the negative side. But that's what happened, and I'm here today. And the positive side, you know, I think I contributed uh, to helping people. I think through AA, through I think I've been a kind of a helpful person. I have good kids, and what I'm looking forward to is just the adventure. What's going to happen? To be honest with you, I'm looking forward to weddings. I'm looking forward to, good things happening in my life, in my kids' life. I don't have any big plan. I'm content where I am. I really am. I've always kind of had an intuitive feeling about my life, and I believe exactly where I'm supposed to be. And I hope I have at least another 20 years left. That's all I want, because it's even at 73, it's tough getting old, Kurt. So I think I always had an innate gratitude for life, period. And
Yeah.
I think that's kind of always driven me too. Was grateful to be here, grateful to have had all these great experiences positively, and you know it was great. The negative things were, I have gratitude for that, because it made me a I think a better person. And then again, I think I mentioned this before. Also, as you age, you also realize that you don't know a damn thing about anything, except maybe yourself a little bit. So I try not to be as judgmental as I was, because I say my mother was very judgmental. I was always kind of what was right and what was wrong. And I never really looked at the whole of a person or realized that a person has to, that's who they are, and they have to find their own way. And what they're doing, whether I think it's right or not, is not necessarily I mean, it's not my place to judge them. So I think I've become less judgmental too, which is good. But I really am. I'm very content where I am today. And that's what she said. Seriously. I don't have any deep I don't think I have a lot of regrets. I have some, but they're my regrets. And I've learned to live with them. And I've really been very fortunate, I think. And I'm very grateful for that. And I hope I live till at least, I don't think 20 years. I think I'd like to live till maybe 85. So another 12 years. By that time, there should be a couple of marriages anyway. Maybe you and Serena will adopt.
If you mean dogs.
Yeah. No. No, I don't. I
Fine
think
with
yeah,
me. It's